George Kilpatrick, inspiration for the nation. It is now time for us to take a look at your money. We're pleased to be joined by Vicki Brackens, president of Brackens Financial Solutions Network, LLC, and a registered representative of Lincoln Financial Advisors Corp., member SIPC. Vicki Brackens and Brackens Financial Solutions Network, supporter of Inspiration for the Nation. And I tell you what, Vicki, this week we are going to, is it Financial 101, the basic stepping stones to the investment process, right? I think that's what you want to get to.
Right.
But before we get to that, you always have a before we get to that.
Right, before we
Hi, Vicki, how you doing? I guess we'll say that first.
Right.
But before we get to that, you probably want to tidy look back. So go ahead.
Right, okay.
Last time we got together.
Yes, okay,
go ahead.
I
There you
want to
go.
make sure that everybody's brought up to date.
Yes.
We were starting our conversation on risk tolerance versus risk capacity.
Yes.
One of the things that I really wanted to emphasize again was risk tolerance is about your ability to handle fluctuations. So let me give you an example. If I said to you, George, you've got $100,000 sitting in your investment portfolio, and because of market conditions this morning, it went down by 10%. How would you feel and what would you do?
Right. I would, in that instance, I would probably have an initial panic, but I would be okay because I know it's part of the fluctuation of a market. So I would, after I recovered and got off the floor, I'd be okay.
All right, then. So let me turn it around a little bit. If I said to you, George, this morning because of market fluctuations, you lost $10,000, how would you feel and how would you react?
I would be a little shell-shocked initially. Yeah, I would.
Okay, so, and I did it that way because many times we talk in percentages and there is not an emotional or the same level of emotional connection to percentages versus saying hard cash has left your account and you now have $10,000 less than you had before. When we measure risk tolerance, what we're really saying is that on an emotional basis, what will your first of all, your reaction be, and how will you feel? What will you do? If you reach out and start to sell your account because of that, then you are going to possibly disrupt some of the long-range plans that you have. So if you recall, when we talked about risk tolerance before, it's about long-range money. But I also want to bring into another subject here, and I'm going to encourage everybody to go to one of my favorite sources, which is Investopedia.com, to look up a indices called the NASDAQ. NASDAQ is the indices that basically measures, it's an electronic trading system, but it basically measures the technology sector for the most part. The NASDAQ in 2000 was somewhere around the level of 5,048.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of, say, about 15 years later, it was still somewhere around 5,000 points. That means for 14 years, and I consider that to be a pretty long period of time, individuals didn't make any money.
Right.
It possibly didn't make any money, I should say. But by using some of the basic investment principles that we're going to move forward on, there was money made. But just because we have time doesn't necessarily mean we will always have positive results. And that's the thing that I want everyone to understand. There's a process and principles that you have to use to enhance the positive returns that you want. One of those principles is something called dollar cost averaging.
Mm-hmm.
You've probably heard of that. If not, you've been involved with it.
Well, I'm going to ring the bell anyway.
All right. You've probably heard about it or been involved in that without really realizing it.
Oh, what that bell was the jargon bell. And if Vicki says something that I think I don't understand or I might think you don't understand, I'm going to ring that bell. So here it is again. If you wonder, why did he ring that random bell? So there you go.
All right, then. So let's go back to dollar cost averaging. Dollar cost averaging is about consistency. Establishing a consistent amount to invest in a portfolio over a period of time. Why do we want to do that? So go back to the example that I had earlier on the NASDAQ. 2000, roughly 5,000 points. Somewhere 14, 15 years later, still around 5,000 points. Why? Because we went through two very deep market cycles. If you remember, the dot-com bubble and the financial recession.
Yeah.
All right. Both of those were very impactful for the NASDAQ, somewhere around 50 to 60% losses as far as contraction in those accounts at that point.
Why don't you take 2 seconds and explain what happened with the .com bust?
Sure. .com bust. 2000, 1999, I almost wondered if it was Prince. What started to happen is that we had a run-up, a bubble. A bubble is where there's an overemphasis in one particular sector, particularly the technology sector. So the individual accounts that were associated primarily with the NASDAQ, which would have been your .coms, pet.com and shoe.com. And if you recall, right at the end of that period, anything that had a .com on it was going up 200, 300, 400, 500% in a year's time.
Right.
There was no justification on a valuation.
But some people made money because they
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
Why? Because they got out at the right time.
Yeah.
But when it started to unwind, when it started to go down, it was like a pin in a balloon. And first it was a little seeps, but then it was a pop, and everything started to come down at one time. Okay? The NASDAQ, which is centered around the technology sector, took the brunt of that hit. Wasn't that other sectors weren't impacted, but that's where the majority of that hit was. So that's what happened in the .com bubble. So when we go back and look at 2000, it took almost 15 years. So if you had $1 in there that day and put no more dollars in, it took you 15 years to get $1. But people made money during that time. Why? They made money because they used one of the basic principles of investing, which is dollar cost averaging. Everything wasn't bad. Just because the price went down, think about it. Apple was still good at the end of that. Google was still good at the end of that.
Were they even in that?
Amazon, all of those sectors, Intel and all of those guys, Microsoft, which are all in the technology sector, survived. If you had been investing consistently down the trough as the price came down, when the recovery started, you would have used one of the best principles in investing, which is to buy low, so that throughout the cycle, $1 in, $1 in, $1 in, but each time you were buying more and more shares because the price was going down, then you would have actually, even through the recovery period, made money, even though the actual peak number for the NASDAQ was not reached again for 15 years. Dollar cost averaging is a consistent way of investing. Dollar cost averaging basically means set a dollar amount, and every month or every quarter or every year, consistently invest through both the ups and the downs. So, George, at this point in time, I think for us, we should probably, our plate is really full, okay? Because we've talked about now risk tolerance, we've talked about risk capacity, we've talked about dollar cost averaging as a way of one of the basics for the stepping stones in the investment process. In the future, we're going to go through and look at rebalancing and diversification and asset allocation to complete the process. But today, I will say our plate is full.
More information, brackensfsn.com, or you can call Vicki at 315-428. You want to say that?
No.
428-8448.
Thanks, George.
Inspiration for the nation. Vicki Brackens is the president of Brackens Financial Solutions Network, LLC, and a registered representative of Lincoln Financial Advisors Corp., member SIPC. All right, thank you very much, Vicki, and thank you, by the way, Brackens Financial Solutions Network, LLC, sponsor of Inspiration for the Nation.